Ramatila Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Shri Radha Govardhana ki Jai, Shri Krishna Balaram Giriraj Maharaj ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Is it? Which one is 66? Chaitanya Nityananda Tanra Parama Vishwasha Chaitanya Charite Tanira Parama Ulasam. Translation: Pandit Haridas had great faith in Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. Therefore, he took great satisfaction in knowing about their pastimes and qualities. He always accepted the good qualities of Vaishnavas and never found fault in them. He engaged his heart and soul only to satisfy the Vaishnavas. Purport: it is a qualification of a Vaishnava that he is adosha darshi, he never sees others' faults. Of course, every human being has both good qualities and faults. Therefore, it is said, Sajjana gunam ichanti dosham ichanti paramaha. Everyone has a combination of faults and glories, but a Vaishnava, a sober man, accepts only a man's glories and not his faults. For flies seek souls, whereas honeybees seek honey. Haridas Pandit never found fault with the Vaishnava, but considered only his good qualities. He always heard the reading of Sri Chaitanya Mangal, and all the other Vaishnavas used to hear it by his grace. Like the full moon, he illuminated the entire assembly of the Vaishnavas by speaking Chaitanya Mangal, and by the nectar of his qualities he increased their transcendental bliss. By his causeless mercy, he ordered me to write about the last pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 66. Govinda Goswami, the priest engaged in the service of Lord Govinda in Vrindavan, was a disciple of Kashishwara Goswami. There was no servant more dear to the Govinda deity. Purport: Kashishwara Goswami, also known as Kashishwara Pandit, was a disciple of Ishwarapuri and son of Vasudeva Bhattacharya, who belonged to the dynasty of Kanji-lala Kanu. His surname was Chaudhuri. His nephew's sister's son, whose name was Rudra Pandit, was the original priest of Vallabhapura, which is situated about 1 mile from the Shiranath-Mahapura railway station in the village of Chatara. Installed there are the deities of Radha Govinda and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Kashishwara Goswami was a very strong man, and therefore when Lord Chaitanya visited the temple of Jagannath, he used to protect the Lord from the crowds. Another of his duties was to distribute prasad to the devotees after kirtan. He was also one of the contemporaries of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was with the Lord in Jagannath Puri. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who also visited the temple at Vallabhapura. At this time, the person in charge was Shaivit Sri Shiva Chandra Chaudhuri, who was a descendant of Kashishwara Goswami's brother. In Vallabhapura, there was a permanent arrangement to cook 9 kilos of rice, vegetables and other foodstuffs. And near the village there is sufficient land which belongs to the deity on which this rice was grown. Unfortunately, the descendants of Kashishwara Goswami's brother have sold a major portion of this land, and therefore the deity worship has now been hampered. It is said in the Gaura Gonadesh Dipika that the servant of Krishna in Vrindavan named Bringara descended as Kashishwara Goswami. During the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in our household life, we also sometimes visited this temple of Vallabhapura and took prasadam there at noon. The deities of this temple, Shri Shri Radha Govinda and the Gauranga Vigraha, are extremely beautiful. Near Vallabhapura is another temple, beautiful temple of Jagannath. We sometimes used to take prasadam in this Jagannath temple also. These two temples are situated within a 1 mile radius of Shiramapura railway station near Calcutta. I think there's just a few verses. I might just finish this chapter there. Sri Yadavacharya Goswami, a constant associate of Srila Rupa Goswami, was also very enthusiastic in hearing and chanting about Lord Chaitanya pastimes. Bogara Goswami, a disciple of Pandit Goswami, was always engaged in topics regarding Lord Chaitanya, knowing nothing else. Among his disciples were Sri Chaitanya Das, who was a priest of the Govinda deity, as well as the Mukudananda Chakravarti and the great devotee Krishna Das. Among the disciples of Ananda Acharya was Shivananda Chakravarti, in whose heart dwelled constantly Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda. In Vrindavan there were also many other great devotees, all of whom desired to hear the last pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. By their mercy, all the devotees ordered me to write of the last pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because of their order only. Although I am shameless, I have attempted to write this Chaitanya Caritamrita. This is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami speaking. To write about the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not an ordinary endeavor. Unless one is empowered by the higher authorities or advanced devotees, one cannot write transcendental literature, for all such literature must be above suspicion. Or in other words, it must have none of the defects of the conditioned souls, namely mistakes, illusions, cheating, and imperfect sense perceptions. The words of Krishna and the disciplic succession that carries the order of Krishna are actually authoritative. To be empowered to write transcendental literature is a privilege in which a writer can take great pride. As a humble Vaishnava, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, being thus empowered, felt very much ashamed that it was he who was to narrate the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Having received the order of the Vaishnavas, but being anxious within my heart, I went to the temple of Madan Mohan in Vrindavan to ask his permission also. The Vaishnava always follows the order of the Guru and Krishna. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita was written by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami by their mercy. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami considered all the devotees that have been mentioned to be his preceptor, gurus and spiritual masters, and Madan Gopal is Krishna himself. Thus, he took permission from both of them. And when he received the mercy of both Guru and Krishna, he was able to write this great literature, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. The example should be followed. Anyone who attempts to write about Krishna must first take permission from the spiritual master and Krishna. Krishna is situated in everyone's heart, and the spiritual master is his direct external representative. Thus, Krishna is situated anta bahir, within and without. One must first become a pure devotee by following the strict regulative principles and chanting 16 rounds daily. And when one thinks he is actually on the Vaishnava platform, he must then take permission from the spiritual master, and that permission must also be confirmed by Krishna from within his heart. Then, if one is sincere and pure, he can write transcendental literature, either prose or poetry. Translation: when I visited the temple of Madan Mohan, the priest Goshani Das was serving the feet of the Lord, and I also prayed at the Lord's lotus feet. When I prayed to the Lord for the Lord's permission, a garland from his neck immediately slipped down. As soon as this happened, a Vaishnava standing there all loudly chanted Hari Bol, and the priest Goshani Das brought me the garland and put it around my neck. I was greatly pleased to have the garland signifying the order of the Lord, and then and there I commenced to write this book. Actually, Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita is not my writing, but the dictation of Sri Madan Mohan. My writing is like the repetition of a parrot. Purport: this should be the attitude of all devotees. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead recognizes the devotee, he gives him the intelligence and dictates how he may go back home, back to Godhead. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Tesam satata yuktanam bhajantam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yinamam upayantite. For those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. This opportunity to engage in transcendental loving service of the Lord is open to everyone, because every living entity is constitutionally a servant of the Lord. To engage in the service of the Lord is a natural function of the living entity, but because he is covered by the influence of Maya, material energy, he thinks it to be a very difficult task. But if he places himself under the guidance of the spiritual master and does everything sincerely, immediately the Lord, who is situated within everyone's heart, dictates how to serve him. Dharami buddhi yogam tam. The Lord gives his direction, and thus the devotee life becomes perfect. Whatever a pure devotee does is done by the dictation of the Supreme Lord. Thus it is confirmed by the author of Chaitanya Caritamrita that whatever he wrote was written under the direction of Sri Madan Mohan deity. Translation: as a wooden doll is made to dance by the magician, I write as Madan Gopal orders me to do so. This is the position of a pure devotee. One should not take any responsibility on his own, but should be a soul surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who will then give him the dictation as Chaitya Guru, or the spiritual master within. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased to guide a devotee from within and without. From within, he guides him as a super soul, and from without, he guides him as a spiritual master. Translation: I accept as my family deity Madan Mohan, whose worshippers are as Raghunath Das, Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatan Goswami. I took permission from Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur by praying at his lotus feet, and upon receiving his order, I have attempted to write this auspicious literature. Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami took permission not only from the Vaishnavas and Madan Mohan, but also from Vrindavan Das Thakur, who is understood to be the Vyas of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur is the authorized writer of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. Without his mercy, therefore, one cannot describe these pastimes. I am foolish, low-born, and insignificant, and I always desire material enjoyment. Yet by the order of the Vaishnavas, I am greatly enthusiastic to write the transcendental literature. The lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami and Raghunath Das Goswami are my source of strength. Remembering the lotus feet can fulfill all one's desires. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring the mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita following in their footsteps. Thus ends the Chaitanya Caritamrita 8th chapter Adi-lila in the matter of the authors receiving the orders of the authorities, Krishna and Guru. It's interesting in this chapter that, like in the chapter of the Bhagavatam called the process of creation and the cause of all causes, most of the time the discussion is about taking permission and about how to become qualified to be able to execute an order, either an order or execute a task given by the Lord. To understand this, we have to understand that there is a Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord is the one who directs all living entities. So he directs the living entities in the spiritual world in an exchange of love, and in the material world he directs the living entities with gunas. And the gunas are three. The gunas are the mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, and the mode of goodness. Krishna describes those gunas in the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, you see, when you do this, you get that. And when you do that, you get this. So it's very simple to assess which guna, and guna in Sanskrit means rope, which rope we are bound with. And how do we do that? Because we'll know exactly what we're attracted to. For example, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the food that is cooked more than 3 hours is the mode of ignorance. So if you're attracted to food that is cooked for more than 3 hours, except for cheese, of course. But if you cook to anything like that, then if you're attracted to that, that means you have the mode of ignorance sitting in your heart. So really speaking, when we deal in the material world, we are not dealing with, I like this and I love her and he loves me, and I like this and I don't like that. We're not dealing with that. We're simply dealing with things that are sitting in our consciousness. And the things that are sitting in our consciousness are those ropes that bind us due to the wrong attitude. The ropes that bind us are the ones that attract the particular object that we are attracted to. For example, if you look at the sex life of a crocodile, well, it's not very appealing to a human being, right? Imagine having a crocodile she as a girlfriend or a boyfriend, crocodile. But we're attracted, and you see some people, they're attracted to certain people, but they're just repulsed by other people. Say, this guy just turns me off, you know. And, you know, to give the classic ISKCON example, the pig is attracted to the stool. And Prabhupada tells him, you give him halava, and this pig almost frowns on it, doesn't want to touch it, but he likes stool. So he's a living entity, he's a servant of Krishna, same as everyone else. So what is it that makes him being attracted to that? It's like within the heart, there's a particular rope that is designated by Krishna, by Krishna's expansions, Prakriti Kriya Manani, that he binds the living entity, forcing him to liking a particular thing. And therefore we go around thinking, I like this, I like rice, I like chapatis, I like lasagna. But you don't. It's because the ropes within the heart force you to. It's a bit like, you know those sticky things that you put in the kitchen to catch the flies? You seen that one, the cockroaches? So when you've got that in the heart, you've got that sticky thing in the heart, and it attracts particular things, and they come and get stuck to it. And we think, oh yeah, I really, you know, me climbing Mount Everest, that's my thing, you know. That's like really, that's me. But actually it doesn't work that way. So Krishna binds us. So in order once we understand this, the simple things are, how do we get rid of the sticky things in the heart? How do we deal with it? So in this chapter here, and in the chapter of the current chapters of the Bhagavatam, it is explained that when one becomes a devotee, as Prabhupada mentions in one of the purports here, it becomes a Vaishnava. And Prabhupada mercifully says, well, you know, once you follow the regular principles and you chant 16 rounds, you become a Vaishnava. You notice he mentioned that in one of the purports. So he said, once you become a Vaishnava, then you can receive orders from the authorities and actually deal with those orders and bring them to a conclusion. But how do you do that? One has to be a proper recipient, and the other thing, one has to get permission. So the permission is a big thing, because it's okay to go around do things, but if one doesn't get authorized or get permissions from Krishna, from Guru, then it's basically pointless. And why is it pointless? Is because, for one, it may not please Guru or Krishna, like we decide to, you know. Prabhupada gives the example, you know, he said, the Guru says, bring me some water, and the disciple comes and here's some milk. I said, I asked for water. I said, no, I thought you'd like milk better. So that's not pleasing, although the endeavor, you think, oh, well, that was nice. No, what's wrong with that? He wanted to bring milk, it's a nice thing. So for one, it may not please the authority of the guru. And second, the worst of all, is that whatever we do that is not authorized or not permitted by the authorities, is that we may simply add to the sticky things in the heart, because we think, oh, I really like that, this is my thing, I got to do this. But the authorities know very well, actually, like a doctor, you don't know that. You don't walk up at the doctor and say, or the pharmacist, could I please have 3 green pills, 2 yellow and 1 red? No one does that. Everyone goes and says, okay, what are your symptoms? Symptoms are this, so therefore this is the prescription. And when you give the prescription, then you follow that prescription. So when we do things on our own, unauthorized, then there's a chance that all we're doing is just feeding the gunas in the heart that we have, thinking, well, that's me, I like that, I like doing this, but I'll do that for Krishna, but I like doing that, But actually there's a danger to that, and the danger is that we keep feeding these bad habits, one of the 3 modes, and Krishna says very clearly that the devotional service will not start until you go above, sama atita. You go above those 3 modes. So therefore in this chapter, it's very clear that Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami is a very qualified person. But why is he qualified? Because the Vaishnavas requested him to do that. And as soon as the Vaishnavas request him to do this, Krishna empowers that. So when you go and ask for a service and say, does Krishna approve of this? Does my guru approve of that? Then immediately you get empowerment and you get protection. Because Dharma means, Dharma is like a set of rules and regulations. But oftentimes we look at rules and regulations as one-way street. I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do this and I can't do that, and it's really like oppressing. I want to be free. I want to think however I think and do whatever I like. But actually when one is under rules and regulation, it's a two-way thing. Like, for example, when you're in an ashram, there are certain rules of ashrams. And what does ashram mean? Shelter. So in the ashram there's certain rules, and you go, brahmacharya ashram means you do this and that. And then the other way that it cuts one way, and then the other way is that the ashram will give you a shelter, that your mind will be peaceful, that you will not add any sticky fly catchers in your heart, you will not do anything that will be detrimental to your advancement. So that's the both ways. But if you say, no, I just want to do my way, then of course you're going to make mistakes, because it's going to come from what's within the heart, and that's what we call in a new age world my emotions, my feelings, my sentiment. But really they're just the gunas that Krishna put there in order to keep us in this material world, that Maya puts us there. So it's very important that's the dangerous part. So Dharma works both ways. So therefore a Vaishnava will always request permission before he does anything. And he seeks the shelter of Krishna to do that, and the blessings of the Vaishnavas. Therefore, when we come to the temple and we offer our obeisances, what is the meaning of that? The meaning of obeisances is just don't get on the floor and mumble something, but it's actually present oneself to the spiritual master and to Krishna, and to say, here I am, can I be here? Am I allowed to be here? Do you accept my presence? And then from there on, can I start serving? And what would you like me to do? And then, so therefore there is it doesn't mean that the disciple is totally unqualified, he's just a total buffoon, and he turns up, and suddenly Krishna is going to sprinkle some water on him, and suddenly he becomes efficient. Prabhupada mentions in the first canto of the Bhagavatam that the Pandavas were the ideal human beings. And why were they the ideal human beings? Because they were perfectly qualified. He says physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, they were top-notch. But they're totally dependent on Krishna's mercy. And Prabhupada qualifies that as the perfection of a human being. That's the perfect human being. So one may think, well, there's a bit of a dichotomy here. How do we do that? I'm a total schlurp here. I don't know what to do. I'll just depend on Krishna. And then you've got a combination of both here. You got a perfect human being, but he's totally dependent on Krishna. But the idea is like, the total perfect human being, he thinks like, well, I've got everything. What do I need Krishna for? So you can see in the Battle of Kurukshetra, for example, it's very clear, whereas Duryodhana, he was also very qualified. Extremely, he had all the qualifications of the spiritual, of the Pandavas. But what did Duryodhana do? Just do my own thing. Whereas Arjuna didn't want to do anything. He had all the material reasons for getting out there and killing everyone. It was perfect situation. But still he didn't want to do it. Only when Krishna told him, yes, I've already done it, you are my instrument. Savya Sachin, in that verse it says that you are my instrument. He said, now you go and do it. Then not only Arjuna had the power, the means to do it, the intelligence to do it, but he was also protected by Krishna. And Krishna showed that when Krishna picked up the wheel, and although he vowed not to fight in the Battle of Kurukshetra, and he was going to hurl the wheel at Bhishma, who was going to kill Arjuna. In that sense, then Arjuna is totally protected, because Arjuna 100% got the permission and the authority from Krishna to do what he had to do, even what he did not want to do. Same as Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, who says really, and Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami really, he's old, he's lame, he can't see. Literally, he cannot see, he cannot write, his hands are trembling. But in his old age, he was ordered by the Vaishnavas, no, you write it. And if you look historically, although there's not much known about Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, but he was a disciple of Raghunath Das Goswami, who Raghunath Das Goswami was contemporary with Swarup Damodar Goswami, and Swarup Damodar Goswami was the one who was the secretary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he kept the diary, so it came down like that. So he was quite remote and he was old, but nonetheless he was ordered to do that, and Krishna empowered him to do that. While we are doing this, doing services and activities that are authorized by Krishna and permitted by Krishna, we cannot by sense Krishna's presence. And this is what Brahma says to Narad Muni. When Narad Muni questioned him, well, I think you're God. And he says, thank you for questioning me, because that makes me meditate and absorb and appreciate Krishna's presence in my energy. So by asking permission and by seeking direction from the authorities before we engage in service, we actually appreciate Krishna's presence and Krishna's power, and therefore we never say, I did it, it was great, I did it. And this is when we get the sticky stuff in the heart, because when it comes from the heart, when it comes from, I feel like doing this, and today I don't feel like doing that. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he boils everything down to duty. And if you read the Bhagavad Gita and you want to summarize the Bhagavad Gita in one word, what would that word be? It'll be yagya. It'll be sacrifice, because sacrifice is a synonym of reciprocity. Reciprocity, which means, why is it that we have to do sacrifice to Krishna? Why is it that we have to, give things and do things for Krishna? Simply because that's the basis of reciprocation. There's no relationship in the world that exists without a loving reciprocation. If you, even in a mundane relationship, if you don't cultivate reciprocation, you don't do something for your beloved, it'll go sour. So the whole universe is based on that, and that's what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. It's boiled down, you reciprocate with. But how can we reciprocate with someone if we don't ask someone, what do you actually really like? What is it that you really like? So when we get rain, we get sunshine, we get air, all this, we need to reciprocate. Called yagya in the Bhagavad Gita. So when we do that, automatically we understand that there is a Supreme Lord. There is someone who's in charge. Because everyone is seeking love, and love, the basis of love is reciprocation, right? But you're going to reciprocate with who? Isn't it? There has to be. So therefore, Krishna makes that point, very strong point, that if you understand this point of reciprocation, you go to the person and you say, what would you like me to do? Not like, oh, I do whatever I want. And therefore, Krishna, the substrata of a reciprocation is duty. Because when one wants to really get somewhere, he gets to the platform of trying to please the person who is reciprocating with. And how do you do that? Well, today you asked me to hang the clothes on the line and to do the ironing, which I totally hate, but I'll do it because you asked me, and because, yeah, I do love you. And I'll do it for that. So therefore, Krishna attaches a lot of importance on duty, so that I will do it. And this is when the directions of the authorities come in. Today you're going to do this, I don't like doing that. Well, I'll do it anyway, not because by force, or because if I don't do it I'll get turfed out, but simply to understand that this is good for me. That I will not be dealing with, I will not be coming from my sticky heart, where I will bring more, there will be more. Prahlad Maharaj says the solution of the problem is always worse than the problem in the first place. So when we do things like that, based on the mundane platform, without spiritual authority and permission, then we attract more flies to the sticky pad. So this is what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is talking about here. See how he goes around to the deities, he asks for permission, then the garland falls down, all those kind of things. But these are signs. So therefore, a devotee should always be looking for authorization. Doesn't matter how good it is. And the classic example which we've given before is Ekalavya. Ekalavya was great. Cut a long story short, he becomes a great archer. And then when the guru said, how did you become the archer? Well, I just spied on the instructions, but actually I wasn't authorized. So then he said, okay, give me your payment. And of course the payment was his thumb, so he had to cut his thumb off. And when you cut the thumb off, you can't shoot the arrows anymore, so you lose everything. So Ekalavya was a classic example of someone doing something unauthorized. And he was great at it, it was fantastic. So was Duryodhana, so was Kamsa. Kamsa was so great that no one would, budge an eyelid in front of him, because they had so much power that they could kill just by sound. So no one would do anything. So in that sense, he had a lot of power, but the wrong way. That power was not authorized and was not permitted. So it's better to do something simple like cleaning the temple in a permitted way than do big things which are not authorized and not accepted by authorities. And this is the points that are being made here in this chapter. Okay. Any questions or comments?
Notice one of the purports Srila Prabhupada mentions you have to approach the spiritual master and then you have to get confirmation from the super soul. In other places it says if you get intuition from the super soul, you should get it confirmed by the spiritual master. But is it the same thing or something different being said here? Okay. In other words, you go to the spiritual master, he gives you the deal, he says okay, and then you have to get, he says in the purport, then you get it confirmed by the super soul. So how's that?
I think in the activities you will get confirmed by the super soul. Sometimes you do something and like you're pushing something uphill. So the super soul, oftentimes you can see that there are things you do and you don't know why you do them, and you look inside, you said, yeah, that was right. That was the right thing to do. And somehow or other then you know that you're guided by the super soul. But of course, that should always be confirmed by the general assembly of devotees. I would say in our movement we confirm the super soul and the instructions by the association of devotees. So what was your thing again?
No, just I noticed that I've read Srila Prabhupada make the same point in the opposite order. That's all. This what she read.
He gets instruction from super soul and then he gets confirmed with guru.
Yeah, and in this instance you said you get it confirmed by the guru, then get it confirmed.
Well, I guess that means you need both, really, which is what Prabhupada says in those purports. So you need both. And Krishnadas Giriraj Goswami was asked by the devotees. He was asked by his guru, Raghunath Das, and then he went to Krishna, and Krishna confirmed that. I don't think they do that as a challenge, but to make sure that they have the package. Because Maya can really trick us in many ways.
Just looking to that point, Krishna Guru mentioned in, I think it's in the third canto, Prabhupada explains that Krishna first induces devotional service, but then he sanctions. So, that's super soul. He's inducing us to do service. And any service that we do, we also have to have a sanction. So, and later on, Prabhupada explains that anyone who thinks that they're the one that you mentioned this in the past, that anyone who thinks that they're the ones that have come up, or the person that's come up with a great idea, it's actually foolish because
dangerous.
It's used by Krishna.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you for a nice class. There's also that teaching, when Prabhupada talks about the different servants, and he says that the first class servant is one who understands what the guru, I think it's specifically in relation to the guru, what the guru wants before being asked. Perhaps that's more the advanced state. I don't know. Would you like to comment on that?
The three types. One, you tell him and he doesn't do, right? That's a lot. You tell him what to do, he doesn't do it. And the second class, you got to tell him and he does it properly. Is that right?
Yeah.
And the first class, you don't have to tell him, he just does it properly, he knows what it is. Well, I guess you want comments on the first or the third?
The one, where it said that the first class servant is he who understands what has to be done without having to be done.
I think that becomes after serving the spiritual master for a long period of time, one has to understand the mood. And you see, sometimes the difficulty is because the person doesn't understand the mood of the spiritual master and makes mistakes, wrong affiliations, wrong conclusions. So the conclusion and the application of the conclusion will be a classic example of someone who understood the mood of the spiritual master, and at that time he becomes free to act proactively without waiting for the instruction. Please.
You mentioned in the beginning how a Vaishnava always thinks that anything good that he does is Krishna's. Right?
Krishna's.
The beginning is Krishna who's doing it.
No, I didn't say that.
You were reading that at the beginning.
I mean, I read it here, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So?
That's why the writer of the Caitanya does.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I understand. Yes. He's like a parrot, he says, repeating. Yeah.
And then you mentioned that, I don't know if you were reading it or with the comment, that everything that is good, that anything that we accomplish now is not good. Because Krishna is doing it, and it's Krishna's mercy. Some people really argue, how is that reasonable to think that anything good that is happening is Krishna or God, and everything bad is not him?
Right.
Or is it everything?
Are you talking about the material world or?
Well, the devotee sometimes does things that, maybe sometimes they're glorious and sometimes he makes, mistakes, or he does things that they're not so good.
Yeah.
Let's say devotees. So how are we to understand from a reasoning point of view that everything good is just Krishna and everything bad is us?
Well, no, it's not quite like that. Because there's many various levels. One level, for example, is that in the material world there's no good and bad. This is a mental concoction. It's all bad. But it's a mental concoction that it's good or bad. This is what we make according to the things that come from our heart. We say, oh yeah, it's good, it's because I like it. But actually it's not so good. If you look in the long term, it's not so good. And whether Krishna does something and it's great, and we do something and it's not so good, not necessarily. Because sometimes Krishna, we can do something, but you'll see in the long run how actually it comes out good. It looks bad at the beginning, but then, which is not a justification, but nonetheless you can see that sometimes things I've done and you say, oh God, that wasn't too good, but the end result was actually very good. And sometimes, yes, it's bad, and the end is bad as well. So it has to be taken in context also. I think it's a quite difficult, for me anyway, it's a quite difficult one to answer just like that, because it has a lot of other things that come in. Particular situation. I don't know if you refer to a particular situation or what, but sometimes it's challenging. So yeah, I mean, you could say, look, the whole battle of Kurukshetra looked bad, but he ended up good things. Krishna re-established the principles of religion. But if you look at it from a mundane point of view, it's bad. I mean, there are atrocities, women without husband, etc., etc. So, from one point of view, yeah, it's bad. It's not so easy to. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.